If you're old enough to remember when phones had cords and the only thing that went viral was a cold, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Big 6-0 with Kaylee Harris and Guy Rawlison. Because who better to discuss life's second act than two people who still think mature is a type of cheese?
Well, welcome everybody to this special edition of the Big 6-0 podcast. I'm Kaylee Harris, and joining me in the studio today is former Deputy School Captain from Epping West Primary School and all-round great guy, Guy Rawlison. Hello.
Don't say any more. You had me at great guy. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. And I said it's a special edition this week. I'm going to take you back to the 70s today. So cast your mind back to 1976. I was 12. And Countdown was a big part of our lives every Sunday night. I used to love watching the young girls there holding the tinsel above their heads and waving it around and screaming to the likes of John Paul Young, Daryl Braithwaite, Marty Groan, and our next guest who burst onto the music scene with this great song.
Never gonna fall in love again. I don't wanna start with someone new, 'cause I couldn't bear to see it end, just like me and you. No, I never wanna feel the pain.
A very, very warm welcome to Mark Holden. Good morning to you.
Good morning. I was just listening to that vocal and thinking how strong and high it was. And there was no, there was no AI or pitching or any of that sort of thing. The vocal was the vocal. I'm just listening back to it then and going, wow, that was a pretty good vocal in 1975 or 6 when I sang it.
You betcha it was. What do you remember about those days, Mark? Just take us back to 1976. Now, I know a bit of history before that. You started to study law at 17.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden...
Yes, I did Showcase in 1974, which was the equivalent of Australian Idol. It was on Channel 9. And it was a talent show, but it included comedians and opera singers and violin players. And I went on and it was Hector Crawford. Hector Crawford had an orchestra, and he created the show so that he could have an orchestra, really. And anyway, I was on that show in 1974. And it was beautiful to play with his orchestra, and because it was original songs. I was singing my original songs that I'd been writing, when I was since 17, 18, 19. And then I got through there. A guy in Sydney saw me on television called John Brommel. He was a publisher and lived in Sydney, and he saw me on Showcase and said, "Hey, why don't you come up to Sydney?" And he organised. I stayed in. He lived in Manly, and he had an underground area under his house that I kind of camped in, and he organised a showcase for me at the Kirk Gallery, it was called, and EMI signed me off the back of that. So I moved to Sydney in my last year of my law degree, and I went to UNSW for a year, and gradually over the course of that year, I dropped out of each subject. So I managed to pass one subject in my final year, but I didn't miss the other 3, so it kind of fell to the wayside. But then I got Joseph's Technicolor Dreamcoat, and that was incredible. That was at the Seymour Centre. And I think that was 75, and then my first album, that was the album made from those songs that I all wrote myself. That came out on EMI, and that completely stiffed. And in 1975-ish, I got a call out of the blue from EMI from a guy called Colin Peterson. And now Colin Peterson was Smiley. Some of you listeners might be old enough to remember who Smiley was. I'm barely old enough to remember. Smiley was a young blonde-headed kid as an actor in a film, famous film back in those days, and that was Colin Peterson. And then he became the drummer of the Bee Gees. And so he was the original drummer of the Bee Gees. By the time he was at EMI in 1975, he was no longer in the Bee Gees. They'd moved on. But he brought the song Never Gonna Fall in Love Again to me. And he really changed my life, because it wasn't a song I had written. And I was probably going to be dropped by EMI because the album was a complete failure. And they put quite a bit of money into me, as a matter of fact, in terms of, promoting it and doing all. They did as good a job as they possibly could, but it just didn't work. And so he brought this song to me, and out of the blue. And turns out that because he was in the Bee Gees and he was a drummer, he knew how to make records. And he made this fantastic record of Never Gonna Fall in Love Again on me. And he got a really great vocal out of me, as I just relived with you a minute ago. And it came out, and it actually became a hit. And it became a hit because of the record. It was probably the only time in my life that me as an artist got a song to sell just on the song, because once I got on Countdown, it was all about Countdown. It was all about TV, and the radio followed the TV. The songs I Want to Make You My Lady and Last Romance and Reach Out for the One Who Loves You became hits because of Countdown. Countdown was so huge and everywhere. You could see it in Weipa, you could see it in Bruny Island, you could see it in Perth. That was the only station that was like that at the time. And Colin, I reached out to Colin about 2 years ago, and I said to him, I got his phone number from somebody, and he was still alive. And I said to him, how come we only ever did one song together? How come I never called you? This is the first time I've called you in 50 years. And how come you didn't call me? After we had a hit together. And he said, I got fired.
Can we go back just a few years from this and talk about young Mark? I mean, you're an Adelaide boy.
Yes.
What sort of kid was young Mark Holden growing up?
Skinny. Definitely skinny. Always had music around me from my mother and my father. My brother was a musician before me. He picked up the guitar as a young teen, and I've always been the younger brother. I like to say I'm very happy to be William I'm very happy to be Harry to my brother. I'm very happy to be Harry to my brother's William, because he became a singer in a band with the Brewster Jones brothers that was called the Moonshine Jug and String Band. They went on to become the Angels. But when I was a young kid still in my school uniform, I would go and see my brother in the pubs around Adelaide playing with the Brewster Jones brothers in a jug band, and they were just so fabulous,
Yeah.
and I just fell in love with it.
In an earlier podcast, we spoke to Marty Roan, and he talks about the Countdown years, which is the same time that you were in that whole scene. And he talked about how the audience members, all the kids, would wait outside for hours to get into the ABC studio. So he said by the time they got in, they were very smelly.
I don't remember that part of it, but I do remember that it was the first experience for most of us of that kind of fandom, and because it was such a big show, and it was shown on Sunday evening, but then it was repeated on the following Saturday.
Yeah.
So you got two hits, you got two shots of the entire country.
Yeah.
And like Idol in 2003 when we started that, it was at a time when families sat around the television and watched Countdown on a Sunday evening. The whole family would, and everywhere.
Yeah. Well, every young teenage girl wanted to be the one that got the carnation from you, Mark, on that. We all watched that and we wanted to be the one.
I kind of created the character of the Carnation Kid.
Yeah.
By accident at the start. When Never Gonna Fall in Love became a hit, Paul Drain from Countdown decided that they would make a video of the song so that they could show it in the top 10. And so he flew to Sydney, and we went out to a place in Hunters Hill, a beautiful old house in Hunters Hill, that's in the Never Gonna Fall in Love Again video. And I had cricket creams, braces, a grandpa shirt, and my father's old Scotch college blazer. And I thought I'd put that all together because it was an old house. It was like a 19th century house, beautiful old house. So I put all that kind of oldie stuff, like 1920s stuff on, because I physically had it. I had cricket green. I had a grandpa shirt. I had some American braces, actually, Stars and Stripes braces that Billy Connolly gave me, and my father's Scotch college jacket, and it sort of created a character quite by accident. And then after that, I bought Hardy Amy suits, and there was a really groovy shop in Sydney, and my old man brain has deserted me, but your listeners and your viewers will know it. That was a famous sort of hip fashion shop in Sydney in those days, and they made the collars, the round neck collars for me, and so it went down a kind of a rabbit hole on the look because of Countdown.
I mean, perception is reality, isn't it, right? I mean, every girl in their teens wanted to know Mark Holden. How much of your personality was actually in that character that you sort of developed, or was it a character?
It was definitely a character. It was the Carnation Kid was a TV creation. On the other hand, I went to a school where I wore a suit every day, so I was used to wearing suits. I've been a lawyer for 14 years. I wore a suit every day. So it's that kind of thing is, I heightened it for television, but I'm used to wearing suits and ties and dressing in that way. So in a way, it is me, but it's a heightened me, and it was a heightened me.
Yeah.
But when I went to America in 1980, that all disappeared. That whole character disappeared. He only lived for about 5 or 6 years, that character.
Well, I'm going to play you a little bit of this. Hold on. So that was that whole persona.
Yes, that was the Carnations and everything.
Everything about that. But let's go to when you went to the US. Now, you went from 1979 to 1983, and you continued writing and performing. Why did you go to the US?
I went at the last few seconds of 1979, like at Christmas or something or other. So I had a few minutes of the 70s. And as I arrived there, it was really the 80s, and America went from being the 60s and 70s and to Ronald Reagan era, and the whole country did a 180-degree turn in that moment. And actually, I was there for 16 years. I went in 1979, as I said, the very end, and was signed to a label in Los Angeles called the Scotty Brothers. And we put out a couple of songs, and they didn't work. And in the end, in 1982, I was on my ass in Los Angeles without a deal, and trying to, just had to make a decision of whether I was going to stay in America and do something, I didn't know what, or come home and do something, I didn't know what, because the Carnation Kid had disappeared. And I no longer had a deal, and I ran into a woman who was in her 60s at a film, and she used to drive around in a red Mercedes sports car, and she was a psychiatrist. Her name is Lelia, and we would meet for coffee, and she got me interested in Carl Jung. I ended up reading every Carl Jung book, basically learned how to analyze myself, and did dream therapy on myself. I wrote down my dreams every day for a year. I didn't drink, didn't smoke, went kind of pure for a year, and just did a deep dive into my spirit and did what Carl Jung said, which was to have two empty chairs and sit in one chair and ask the empty chair a question, then physically stand up and sit in the other chair and answer the question. And after a year of writing down my dreams, at that time, this whole song appeared in my head called Lady Soul, the whole chorus, the melody, the lyrics, everything. I bought an 8-track TAC recording machine, figured out how to do it, and I got a little drum machine, got a little Korg synthesizer, and created a simple chord and beat and sang the song and wrote the parts that weren't written in the dream. And by a miracle, another act of synchronicity, at that time, I just happened to meet these two guys, Rick Chudikoff, and he pitched it at Berry Gordy, the owner of Motown. Pete Bonetta and Rick Chudikoff, they pitched it at Berry Gordy, and Berry Gordy played it to Smokey Robinson, who was the A&R guy at Motown at that time. He decided to cut it with the Temptations, and they ended up cutting 3 of my tracks, 3 of my songs. But that first one, the one that came from a dream, they recorded that and they put it out as a single, and it went to number 4. It was the universe in the most beautiful way telling me to become a songwriter and to hang in and to believe in my ability, because the songs that I'd written before on my first album, none of them had been hits. The songs that I had hits were not songs that I wrote. So this was the first song that I had written, and I wrote it entirely on my own, and it became a hit and went on the Motown Greatest Hits. So that changed my life as well. Like Colin Peterson changed my life with Never Gonna Fall in Love Again. That meeting Lelia, this old woman who was a very cool psychiatrist person, and she turned me on to this Carl Jung and dreaming and getting in touch with my dreams, and then being able to get the gift of this song that is now on the Motown Greatest Hits. It's a kind of a miracle in a way.
So you've transitioned from singer to songwriter, and you say you pay attention to your dreams because they've probably guided your creativity as well. Have they ever solved problems for you outside of songwriting as well?
Well, I think that was a problem that solved outside of songwriting. That was a pivotal moment of my life where I was trying to decide which direction to take my life on lots of different levels. Physically, which country was I going to be in? What was I going to do? Just the core things of a person's, life. What are you going to do for a living? Who are you?
Let's fast forward to you came back to Australia from the US in 1996. Is that correct? Yep. Okay. And you finished your law degree finally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But music was beckoning, and you co-wrote this song. It's such an anthem to us Aussies, and I remember seeing it performed at the closing ceremony of the Olympics in 2000, and I was so proud of the song because I thought, this is the best Olympic song ever. It is just great.
God bless you. Thank you for that.
Tell us about the song and meeting Vanessa.
Oh, that's another miracle. I mean, it's another miracle, really. When I came back, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I was in my 40s. I had a wife and baby. I thought, well, I'll get my law degree, and so I went back, had to start again. While I was going to Monash and doing my studying again, I did Hey Hey It's Saturday, and at Hey Hey, a guy called Jack Strom was doing Red Faces, and Jack was the floor manager on Ernie Sigley's show in the early 70s, and Ernie was the guy who I first auditioned for in Adelaide in 1971-72 and did his Tonight Show. And then he brought me to Melbourne. So, I knew Jack from right back then. And we were at Hey Hey, and I sort of was just coming back to go, hey, I'm back, did the Hey was another one of those shows that everybody watched. That was at a time when still people were all watching television together. I said, Jack, look, let's find some talent to work with. And I figured he might know somebody, he being at Channel 9 all those years, he might have know of some people. And we weren't looking at the people that he knew, and we didn't really find anyone that was really ticking all the boxes. And then we were at his house, and his fax machine repairman said, there's this girl singing in a Russian restaurant on Dandenong Road. You should go and see it. And so we did. And it was Vanessa Amorosi, and she was 16, just 16. And, I'd just been working with, great black singers in America. And I know what a great voice is. And here was this 16-year-old girl that was just singing like crazy good. And she inspired me. And so I wrote some songs for her. And before I realized what a great writer she is, I just decided to write some songs for her. And one of those songs was Absolutely Everybody. And I was with my brother in Adelaide at a music store. And I asked the guy at the music store, do you know anybody in town who makes tracks? And he made a suggestion for a guy called James Ingram. And I hooked up with James Ingram. I said, hey, look, I'd love to write something with you, or, use your tracks. Do you have any tracks? He said, well, he didn't really have any tracks. So I said, look, I tell you what, I found a song that I liked. And I said, make me a track like this, but change these chords. And he did that. So I had a track that I liked. And I sat with that track at my writing station, and my beautiful little daughter, who was 3 years old. And I sat her on my lap, and I sang Absolutely Everybody through her over that track, and created the melody and the lyrics that is Absolutely Everybody. So it was sung for Vanessa, but it was sung through my beautiful daughter, who I adore. And so it was filled with love and positivity and joy, and Vanessa just absolutely captured it. She did the demo, and the demo became the record, and that vocal that she did on the demo is the record. And she was 17 by the time she did that. And then I discovered what a great writer she is, and we ended up writing Shine together, which is an incredible song with her lyric in it, and that became a hit as well, and became a hit in Europe as well. Both those songs were hits in Europe, which was, thrilling.
And there's just so much talent. Let me touch briefly on Australian Idol. There's so much talent out there. Is there anything that you learned from Australian Idol as well? And I won't go into the whole touchdown sort of thing, but was encouraging young performers. What were you looking for? Is it resilience on that program rather than talent that will get them through? What's?
Well, I think I didn't preach that really, but I should have, because that's the reality. What you just said. You look at somebody like Delta Goodrem, her resilience and her work ethic is so extraordinary, and she, she maximizes her talent by maximizing her effort, and doing it through cancer. And she talk about resilience. She's resilient.
Yeah, speaking of resilience, and speaking of Delta's journey with cancer, you've had your own journey with cancer.
I have, and I'm 15 years past it now, but it happened just as I was going to the bar. I had felt a lump on my neck, and they said it was just a cyst and it would go away. And so unfortunately I left it there for a while, and it didn't go away. And so eventually they discovered that it was thyroid cancer. And by the time they got to it, it had got out into my neck and into my nodes. And so they had to cut into my neck, and he did a brilliant. It's just amazing that people can do. There's people who can do what they can do, with a knife, and but he managed to cut out the little bits that they were encapsulated, which is a miracle. But they were spread out through my neck. So he was going around and cutting these little bits out, and he had to cut around my vocal cords. And so I didn't have a much of a voice, if any, from about 2010 on. Well, as a barrister, it didn't really matter because I could speak, but I couldn't sing. And I created a choir at the bar because barristers are kind of cave dwellers. You know, they don't work in an office. You're not allowed to work in an office. You have to have, they call them chambers. You know, they're like caves.
Yeah.
And so they're isolated. So I put a choir together so that we could all get together as barristers once every couple of weeks at a lunchtime in a church. And I stood down the end with all the terrible singing barristers.
But most people would have slowed down at that point.
And I just made sound is the point. I started to make sound at that point, you know, and it didn't matter because I was standing with a group of men who were not great singers either. And so it just, you know, just over the course of 10, 15 years, I've just figured out a new way to sing.
What kept that dream alive, though, to move back to the bar, become a barrister? What kept that dream alive?
I got fired by Idol, and it was such a shock. You know, I wasn't expecting it. And it was such a gut punch. It threw me off my kilter for a year. And at the end of the year, again, I just thought, well, you know, I'm going to have a sliding doors moment here. I was standing at a line in Elstonwick at the Optus store getting an iPhone for my daughter. You know, in the days we had to line up to get a phone. They were hard to get. And, you know, it was weird. Anyway, we lined up for a couple of hours to get an iPhone. And I was standing in a line next to a guy called William Lai, who was with his son, who was exactly the same age as my daughter. And he was doing the same thing. He was lining up to buy a phone for his son. And so we had an hour in the line together. And he's a barrister. He's now a KC. And he explained to me what a barrister is and how you couldn't incorporate, and you don't work for anybody, or you only work for the court and you work for your client, but that's it. And it appealed to me. You know, I just thought that sounds like, you know, because fighting for people was something that, you know, as a manager of Vanessa and Joel Turner, who was the beatbox kid on Idol that I had a #1 record with. When you're in that position, you're fighting for your client as a manager, and I like fighting for somebody else. And so fighting for somebody else as a barrister made sense to me, and it was something that I could do. So he really guided me through it. He was just such a fantastic, has become a great friend, and he was a mentor, even though he's, you know, 20 years younger than me.
Yeah. Well, we are so glad that your voice did come back, and my goodness, it certainly has come back. And on this week or earlier this month, you released a new single called Every Little Thing, the first from a new album called Now and Then and Shirley MacLaine. What's with that title? What's Shirley MacLaine? What's the link there?
Well, the now, I'll just walk you through the title. The now is the new songs, like the 72-year-old man's voice, the new songs like Every Little Thing, and the then is the 80s, because I just put out a 70s album a couple of weeks ago. I put out all my hits on to Apple and Spotify and all those places, and because they hadn't been put on streamers, so I've done that. But the 80s, I did record all the way through the 80s, but I was recording demos as songs for song demos, and they weren't records. So I've put 4 of the tracks from the 80s along with 8 new songs, and one of the new songs is called Shirley MacLaine, and it's a song that I went to my daughter's wedding last year in Los Angeles in May of last year. And I go through Hawaii because in the old days you had to go through Hawaii to get to America, and I just love Hawaii. I love being there. I love Waikiki. I've been to other islands and everything, but I'm happy just to be at Waikiki. I like the Mai Tai bar at the Royal Hawaiian.
Don't we all?
I like the warm water. You know, you can flop out into the warm water, and there's waves that I love waves. I just love that place. I went through the airport, and you get in early, which is great. The Qantas flight gets you in at 6 o'clock in the morning, so there's hardly anyone in the airport. so you get through easily. Whereas Los Angeles, you can be hours at that airport. So I was really relieved to get into Waikiki. I'm a marijuana user, and I found in the old days you would, in Waikiki, that you go to this particular place and all the old men would be there selling weed. Now, of course, it's legal, but you have to get a prescription, and I wasn't going to be there long enough to get a prescription. So my wife spotted someone and said, okay, and I got a little bud, but there's nowhere to smoke it because you can't smoke anywhere. You can't smoke you can legally smoke, but you can't smoke anywhere. You can't smoke on the beach. You can't smoke in the hotel. You can't smoke in your hotel room. So I said to the people at the Royal Hawaiian, where do the people who work here go and have a smoke? Mm. And so I found the place where they were standing around having their cigarettes, and I was having a smoke and talking to this guy, and he said that he worked with Shirley MacLaine as her kind of tour manager, and he would collect her from the airport, take her to the hotel, then she would do speaking gigs, and he would take her to speaking gigs, then bring her back to the hotel, then take her to the airport. And he did this over a number of years and got to know her. And Shirley MacLaine told him that the reason that he suffers the blues is because he's a descendant of Genghis Khan and he's still paying his old man's dues.
Wow.
and as he said that line, this song appeared in my head. And I had the foresight to just quickly sing it onto my phone. And I sang it onto my phone. And when I got to Los Angeles, I went to visit a bunch of my old friends as part of this very, very happy time, with my daughter getting married to a young man that we really, really love. And a very, very happy time. And I went to visit some of my old mates from my days in Los Angeles who are now in their mid-70s. And they're all, pretty miserable dudes at the time. They've shut down their recording studios. They don't drink or smoke. They've got heart problems.
Yeah.
They're lovely guys, but they're not engaged in music anymore at a personal level. And I said to this one guy who's Richard Feldman, who is a great guy, and we did some great work together over the years. And he did Shakespeare's Sister, amongst other things. And I showed him the song. I said, let's write a song together. I showed him the piece of the song I had, and that gave me a reason to go back to his house, 2 or 3 times while I was in LA for my daughter's wedding, and really just be with him and we made the song together, and we wrote the song together. And then when I came home, he's still got his guitars, and he created the track. And the track is fantastic. He's made a great track. And when I got to Melbourne, I sang the vocal and sent it back to him. And that's the story of Shirley MacLaine. And I've tried to get it to Shirley MacLaine because I'd love her to hear the song. I've tried two or three ways, and so far I haven't managed to get it to Shirley MacLaine.
Well, it's the album in its entirety is out in August, but the song that you've released recently, Every Little Thing, is just a beautiful song. It's gorgeous, and we're gonna say goodbye to you by playing that song out of the interview. But before we do, where can people listen to Every Little Thing? Is there a website or a YouTube people can go to?
Every Little Thing is on all the streamers, Spotify, Apple, all of them. Whatever that one that Amazon have a streaming service as well. It's available to be streamed, but also it's on YouTube. And if you just go to YouTube and look up Mark Holden, Every Little Thing, you'll find it. You'll find it there.
It's beautiful.
And the video was we recorded in a studio in Collingwood, and that video was actually a video of the actual recording. We got in at 10 o'clock in the morning. Gary Pinto said a prayer because I told him the story of the song, and he said a prayer. We went in, we played the song through 2 or 3 times. The camera person was filming them, and after the third one, we said, "That's it, we're done." And so we got in there at 10. By 11, everyone was home. It's the most beautiful recording session I think I've almost ever had. So it was a beautiful moment of where all the musicians came together and just delivered.
Mark Holden, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Every little thing, every little thing. It's all good, it's all right. You're gonna make it through the night. It's all good, it's okay. There's gonna be another brand new day. Never give in, never give up, never give in, never give up.
The views and opinions expressed on the Big 6-0 are personal and reflect those of the hosts and guests. They do not represent the views or positions of any affiliated organisations or companies. This podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for guidance on any personal matters.
And before we go, let's give credit where credit is due. Kaylee Harris and I came up with all the genius content for this week's episode. Our producer, Nick Abood, well, he keeps the lights on and makes sure we don't accidentally upload a cat video instead of a podcast. So thanks for keeping us on track, Nick. Nick?